Welcome to the Cause Effect 4.0 podcast. I'm your host, Celina Lee. What would it take to ensure that AI doesn't just optimize profits, but expands opportunity for all? My guest today sits at a fascinating crossroads where global policy meets real-world innovation. Jason Slater is the Chief of AI, Innovation, and Digital at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO, where he is helping shape how countries, especially emerging economies, build, adopt, and scale AI in ways that is inclusive, practical, and transformative. Jason began in finance, working in the UK public sector and multinational environments before evolving into a leader driving digital transformation with the UN. Today, he's not just thinking about algorithms, he's thinking about systems, economies, industries, and people. Inside UNIDO, the focus is on turning ambition into execution. Inclusive AI is no longer just a concept. It is a practical challenge of building systems that work across countries with vastly different levels of infrastructure, capability, and readiness. I look forward to talking about all of this and more today with Jason. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Celina. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So I want to start with just the broad picture of everything that you're doing at UNIDO. You have over 150 member states at UNIDO, where you sit at the center of industrial transformation globally. Mm-hmm. What are the AI projects that you're leading at UNIDO, and what are you most excited about right now?
No, thanks. Thank you very much. Before I give a few examples of projects, just slightly stepping back on what it is that we're trying to achieve. So, you mentioned there are 173 member states that we have, and what is quite exciting right now at the moment is that, although we are all very familiar with the deployment of artificial intelligence in our daily work, but for you, and you mentioned it, what's unique, and certainly for me and my team, we have a wonderful opportunity on how do you deploy industrial AI. How does you deploy industrial AI solutions in not only for industry, but also for manufacturing? Because, we typically use some of those tools, GPT and Gemini, Copilot, etc. in our daily work. But how do you really solve real problems and issues through the use of emerging technology? That's what I think is really, really exciting for myself. And the way that we are doing this is in twofold. One is very much at the project level. And I'll talk about some of those examples, because one of them we are collaborating with yourself, Celina, and Cindy, some very concrete examples. But let's take the zoom out first, is that, with a lot of the countries, we've received requests from them, around 15 countries in the last 6 months alone, on how can they establish a center of excellence. Why? Because the fear is that they're being left behind. Then they see a lot of the new and emerging technology being deployed, but how can they get access? So how do you get access to technology? How do I get access to the skills that enable me to benefit from that? And of course, there's all the other things that come around it in terms of providing a policy sandbox, connectivity, etc. But what's interesting here is with these centers of excellence, they all have a very clear purpose. And for us within UNIDO, our vision, if I was to look 2-3 years into the future, is that we create almost a neural network and say, well, Ethiopia's fixing leather, Ghana's fixing rice, climate-related issues are being fixed by Barbados, intelligent manufacturing in China. And then how do we bring all of that together and connect them so that for our 173 member states, they know where to go? So that's exciting from a programmatic perspective. But you asked me about projects, and so I'll just give you a couple of two examples, two concrete ones that I like to refer to. They're really going on right now. One of them, the first, is that we collaborated with you and your team in Ghana, and which is on rice. And it's and this is one of the things that's interesting when you refer to data that AI ultimately needs in order for it to in terms of it to learn and to develop a solution from. Rice is data for us. Coffee beans are data. Leather is data.
Yes.
And Ghana is that we know through the production process is that they import around 50% of the rice, and from that of their own produced rice. Around 20% is lost post-harvest. And that was a big challenge for us. And we said, how can we tackle this differently with emerging technology? So with the support of yourself and Cindy, we're saying, how at the beginning can we identify and analyze the quality of the rice using artificial intelligence? And then what happens when it gets to the market? And from that journey, as you start to trace what is the losses in the production process, that for me is a fascinating, exciting example of how AI, because, you know, when we're talking geopolitically, AI is seen as this race towards something greater, better, etc. But for us, it's really practically solving local issues and maximizing what is already coming out of the production processes. So that's one of the first. Another one, which I think is an easy one people to relate to, especially if you see what just happened in the last 24 hours in terms of Japan and the tsunami, is how can you leverage GIS, spatial data, couple it with AI to create digital twins so you can simulate the impact of climate action, climate change. So we have a project going on right now in Brazil. It's around flood resilience and digital twinning, which enables you to simulate and manage the industrial risks by using AI and satellite data. So many others, but those are two of my current highlights in addition to this new programmatic approach.
Yeah, that's amazing, and thank you for mentioning the project that we're doing, Zindy's doing with UNIDO. We're also really excited about it. I guess just a comment on that, like just to put it in perspective, I was just at the World Bank spring meetings, and they've been talking a lot about what they call small AI, and the rice challenge immediately came to mind for me because you know, the distinction they're making, I mean, I think what they're really talking about when they say small AI, it's about solving very specific practical problems on the ground. And on top of it, one of the requirements for that rice, the AI mobile app that we built with you, was that it had to be able to run on a mobile device. Like it's something where you can't have these like massive models that require internet connectivity, large compute. It has to run for a real farmer out in rural Ghana, for example. So anyway, so I think I totally agree with you. If you put all these the sum of all these parts of solving real problems on the ground that have real impact for people, that is actually where the transformation happens. I'm curious because now you mentioned Brazil, you mentioned Ghana, as you're building this network of centers of excellence. What are some of the trends? I mean, in terms of, you know, countries are starting from very different places, and maybe even some of the challenges, well, are similar and different. So yeah, from that point of view, what are some of the trends geographically that you see? What are the opportunities for collaboration or cross-learning among them?
Yeah, I mean, well, we launched in 2023 what we call a global alliance on AI industry and manufacturing, and this was mainly a call to industry and the private sector to see what solutions are out there, you know, to solve certain issues, you know, whether in the space of smart manufacturing or in certain agriculture or other types of processes. So what we've seen from launching this alliance is that particularly with countries, is that they're coming in and looking and saying, I have a problem that I know that I need to solve. So what that's telling you is that, you know, we often hear and talk about networks and building ecosystems, but when you practically do it, and you know that you have partners that you're collaborating with that are prepared to share. And that's one thing I found with the private sector as well, is that don't necessarily look at the private sector as a funding source, but look at it as a solution provider to bring access, you know, to, for example, looking at in regions of Africa and remote areas of unconnectivity. There are solutions that we have within our partner ecosystem that can deploy an antenna-based, where you can get access 5G to a village around 10 square meters using solar and battery energy. So there's really practical solutions. So for me, my point being there is that, Celina, is the trends that we're seeing is the global south recognizes that there's technology available there. They're not necessarily in a position to immediately be able to go out and procure it. So what we're seeing is this trend of creating these kind of guardrails that you can get access to the technology and bringing forward some of the skills to be able to best make use of it within a safe environment. is one of the biggest trends. And as I can just underline what I started the conversation with, we did a global call last summer in Shanghai at the World AI Congress, and you was with us, I think, at our general conference in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. And 15 countries in less than 16 months had come forward and said, we want to be able to do that. And they want to be able to then know that each one of us are using this technology for a very specific challenge, a very specific problem, and others can then learn and utilize this in other areas. So that's one of the things I'm getting more and more is, you know, we just agreed at the Energy Forum here, the International Vienna Energy and Climate Forum. Barbados came forward and actually signed an agreement with us. When they was with us in Riyadh, and they walked into a room and we could see other countries presenting, and that was actually from Kenya. The tech envoy was talking about the issues of Kenya. And there was also from India, and I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to get access from that. So that's what we're seeing right now, especially this movement in the global south, is let's now get access to this technology and get the right skills.
Yeah, and even just the lessons learned from Kenya is enough to drive and inspire other countries from the other side of the world. So you mentioned skills just there. So I wanted to ask you about kind of AI and jobs and the future of work. So 92 million people people or jobs could be displaced globally by 2030 due to AI. But on the other hand, so that's 92 million jobs might be displaced. But on the other hand, some studies show that 170 million new jobs may also emerge. So from this vantage point, what are the risks around kind of mismatches of skills, or how should we be thinking about that?
Well, I'm going to take the positive side of this. I'm not going to look at the negative about some of the jobs that could be displaced, but I do. And again, it comes back to this approach that I've just been mentioning consistently, is that, you know, there is a huge need to upskill the workforce towards the new technology. You know, so if you're, for example, operating in a manufacturing process in a remote area in one of our countries that we're supporting, how do you ensure that they know how to use that machinery and make best use of, you know, artificial intelligence that's embedded with that machine? So, you know, then in terms of optimizing your processes, in terms of your energy efficiency, looking at things back to Ghana, how can you then maximize the lot, you know, so that you don't have losses in your production processes? So I think over the next 2-3 years, you know, we hear a lot, I guess, from the global north about the job losses that may well be coming. Frankly put, in the countries that we are working with and supporting, there's still a huge amount of opportunities to leverage that. If I can quote we recently had a conference in India, the World Future Forum, with the Indian SME Forum. In India, they have around 80 million SMEs. And one of the minister from the Ministry of from SME said, you know, we hear the trends of industry, you know, the Industrial Revolution and then Industrial 4.0 and emerging technology. But those businesses that we're trying to support are already entrenched in 2.0. So there is a lot of concern about what may be displaced, but there's huge opportunities, especially when you look at a country like India with 80 million. 80 million, that's the population of Germany alone in businesses. Need to go through this transformation. They need to go through a transformation. They're established businesses that need to get access to this technology. So it's one thing to be told right now you're a startup and you should put AI at the forefront of your business to have an advantage, but there are those that are already well established that we need to support. So I think for me, when I link it to the jobs question, is there's a lot of opportunity in the immediate term to support them into adapting the business to enable them, whether this through back office operations, leveraging AI, whether it's putting it into the manufacturing processes, whether it's making the productivity more efficient. So I think we can make a very positive impact on the skills that's needed over the next 3-4 years.
Yeah. Is that a part of the
We need,
agenda for the centers?
I mean, it is. It's one. I keep it simple. The centers is free. It's solving a grand challenge. Yeah, solving a grand
Mhm.
challenge of which has been defined with industry and the government. It's about getting technology adoption. It's about making sure that people have the right skills aligned to that, and making sure
Mhm.
that the infrastructure and the connectivity is in place. And for the third one on connectivity infrastructure, that's when we look to partner with other UN agencies such as ITU, for example. We're not in the space
Right.
of connecting, that's not what we do, but we know where to go to bring in the right partners. Yeah. So yeah, that's it is a key component of, and we're teaming, and even then you link it back to what I mentioned before about this AIM Global, and I can say this openly, it was something that was announced recently on one of our press releases. We have a partnership in place with Festo. Festo is one of the leading players when it comes to digital skills in manufacturing. Now, we're not going to develop, UNIDO's not going to develop its own skills curriculum. We cannot possibly be the edge of that, but we know where to go and which partners. So remember what I said before is that, some of the trends, and what I'm talking about a trend here is that private sector wants to come in and support. They see the benefit of bringing some of the technology or skills programs that they have that can enable this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the, I guess, challenges and opportunities about the shift is that I suppose the output is higher quality. Like you might be losing jobs on this side,
Mhm.
or higher value or higher quality. Like you might be losing jobs on this side, but the jobs that are created or the opportunities created on the other side
Mm.
potentially are higher paying, higher value
Yeah.
opportunities, let's say for like young people who are entering the job market.
I'd say that's a very good point. You just mentioned it there in terms of young people, and this is a recognition that young people want to get access. They have the devices, they want to get access to the use of such emerging technology, predominantly in AI. I made a reference to Barbados before. It's one of the latest centers that we've agreed to open. The Minister of Innovation was very clear and said, we have a brain drain, and we also have a population where
Yes.
primarily we're reliant upon tourism. And we want to transform ourselves to becoming a hub, not only for Barbados, but for small islands. And for that, we need talent. So first and foremost is we really need to invest in the talent. We need the right innovation challenges, and we need to bring in the right partners that can then support and enable it. So there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Even when you go back to the example of Ghana and you start looking in Africa, I mean, I've been mentoring a couple of startups in Africa. Why? Because I really want to understand what motivates a young person who was, from Uganda, went to UK, got educated, won an innovation challenge. But why did he go back to his country to see how can he start digitalizing and connecting young farmers? Because it's a motivation that once you get access to that technology, you can actually support what is a very traditional industry, but is a critical one. Food is critical. We know that it's one of our UNIDO's priorities is that world without hunger. How can we put in place the right supply chains, the right food security mechanisms, etc. But so in terms of the jobs and skills that's required, it's finding if one finds the purpose, you see that the talent will start to follow. You have evidence of
Yes.
that with the work you're doing in Cindy and the software
Yes.
engineers that you're engaged with. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think from our experience and as well why I'm excited about the partnership with UNIDO is you're starting from industry. You're actually starting from the actual problem. It's not AI is not just a hammer looking for a nail, but
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
actually starting
Yeah.
with real market issues that people recognize. Um, so I like that. I mean, I really appreciate that the centers are taking this very system level kind of ecosystem and system level view on what it means to transform and develop. Okay, I have a question about related to this. So 750 million people still lack electricity, or still lacked electricity in 2023. So over 2.6 billion people remain offline, 32% of the global population. It takes tremendous investment to close these fundamental infrastructure gaps. How are you addressing this in light of, I guess, the centers of excellence, and also when you think about how do you even leapfrog, or is it even a leapfrog with AI?
Oof. I mean, if I may give you a bit of positive news, the latest figures on the digital divide is 2.2 billion, according to our good friends in ITU. So clearly inroads are being made. And that's in it. First of all, let's talk about the connectivity. And ultimately, when we think about AI and you know, when we think of when Jensen's presenting the cake, and at the bottom of the cake is infrastructure and energy that's needed. And, you know, we in industrial AI are at the top of that apex, thinking more about the application of AI and what purpose it serves. And a couple of weeks ago here in Vienna, as I mentioned, we had this international Vienna Energy Climate Forum. And one of the key topics that we were debating from two perspectives, one was from China, was what technology is there that can help when it comes to energy, getting access to energy, to fuel, data centers. And it was a very broad range topics from how do you look at sustainable cooling? You know, there's access to solar on one hand to fuel a data center, but at the same time, one needs to cool it. There's also even looking at a topic around small modular reactors. There's something that not we at UNIDO are promoting, but the IEA is. And we know that in the private sector, some of the big tech are already looking to procure that. So people are having to see newer ways at how can they get access to energy that can fuel the data centers and ultimately artificial intelligence. Then we switched to another one, which was Ukraine. So looking at China from being being one of the world leaders when it looks at, getting access to renewables, new technology, also the deployment of AI and the solutions that they're coming forward, to suddenly pivoting into Ukraine, which is a totally different aspect, is, energy there by de facto for them to survive is something that's a scarce resource. We know what they're being impacted by at the moment, but then you start to ask, well, where could AI help? And there, the issue is not about the supply of energy, but is the demand for energy. And how artificial intelligence can help you understand which business should remain online, which one needs to be turned off. It's a very different perspective, though. But why I gave that example, though, Celina, is that it's interesting to see how countries are looking at solving this issue about how do you have connectivity, what is the energy that's needed to drive this AI revolution that we're going through, and where other countries that are going through a very in a conflict situation are having to see how you can leverage emerging technology to maximize the energy that you have from a demand perspective. So I think this comes also back to that question that you asked me before about emerging trends, is that how can people understand how such technologies could be used from a serious conflict situation. And you can even talk about what's going on right now in the press when we talk about the issue that we need to think about with oil, and some of the restrictions that are coming up because of the conflict in the Middle East. Some of the countries are going to need to start thinking about, how do I best manage my demand on oil? We're already hearing around, shortage of jet fuel, etc. So point being is, such algorithms, such tools in AI can be very, very powerful to help us know best how to provide the right supply, the right demand, and ultimately to know how best to connect. And therefore, when it comes to your question on 2.2 billion, what was 2.6 a couple of years ago, and now it's 2.2, it's clear that solutions are coming out that can help us and support us. I mentioned one very specific one a few minutes ago, where I've seen it being deployed in remote villages in Zambia in particular. It is an antenna. It has got 2 solar panels. It's got a battery, and it connects 10 square meters. Now that gives 5G access to that 10 square meters. That is, square kilometers. Sorry, not square meters. Square kilometers. Sorry. So there are solutions there, and that's what we do. We're promoting those. And we want to say, right, look, there is a lighthouse solution of connectivity in a remote area. How can we replicate that in others? Yeah.
No, that's amazing. I mean, I think, I was going to ask another question about investment in Africa and just how low it is. But I think that even that example in Zambia, I mean, it just shows what we've also seen at Zindi is the kind of the types of innovations that are born out of the context in Africa are, well, are innovations that you wouldn't see in other parts of the world, and actually they are cutting edge technological solutions.
But that's a good point, and that's when you link it to the innovation, and why I gave the two examples. One would not be surprised to be hearing that China is coming up with some of these big grand solutions towards infrastructure, energy, and connectivity. But when you're in a scenario like Ukraine where you really are constrained, innovation thrives. Innovation absolutely thrives. And also the fact that you're not constrained by regulation. Also, it enables it to thrive. Yeah. And one can start to look at that as a use case and say, actually, what's going on right there can help in a situation, take it into somewhere else, perhaps it's being impacted by scarcity in oil now, and how you could use such technology. And that's the point being as well, like you mentioned, in Africa, is that we'll find a solution to connectivity. And actually, one of the partners that we have in our AIM Global Alliance is the one that provided that solution. And they've enabled 178 million to be connected.
Wow.
That goes beyond being a pilot, 178 million. No?
Yeah.
That one village was, but now, and it's rapidly expanding that people can get access. And do you know how much one of those devices costs?
How much?
$10,000.
Wow.
Basically connect such an area. So no, and that's what I come back to. UNIDO. That's what I come back to. What I think our role is UNIDO and industrial development is that we work very closely with the private sector, and it's to get access to such technology and to promote it to our member states and all the way down to the innovators, the SMEs, so that they know that there are solutions that are out there. So yeah, that's
Yeah. And even on the compute side, I don't know if you're doing any work with compute, but similarly, you're talking about something that in the context of like the US or China, you're talking about these big, data centers and, making billions of dollars of investment in that. But in the African context, there's some interesting projects that are coming up to solve the compute issue as well. I don't know if you're working on anything that addresses those.
No, we are not. No, on the compute, we are not. Only in the sense that we recognize that in terms of industry, we need to have a stance on AI for energy and what's needed in terms of course, we want to be promoting what I call the twin transition, which is not only green industrialization, but digital, getting access to digital. And of course, we recognize that for all of what we're looking into the future on industrial AI, it's going to need to be powered by some form of data centers. So it is an area that we are starting to support. It's not compute is not really one that we actively getting involved in, but we're very much aware of some of what's going on, particularly with like Cassava and the partnership with Envisions, right. The data centers coming out of South Africa. Now, can you take that Pan-Africa? Interestingly, very, very early stages right now, because we have a Pan-Africa program that's funded by the European Union, and we want to see how we can team up so that we can leverage their compute power to solve the next challenge. We refer to rice in Ghana, but the next one, what is the challenge of South Africa around automotive? What is going on when it comes to Ethiopia on coffee and leather? So we're looking to team up with them, Celina, but it's not an area that we specialize in on the compute side now.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, all the same, I think I really like that you're taking this kind of system level view on development and I guess drawing on real localized innovations that are fit for purpose. Final couple of questions. I'm interested because you were working, you mentioned car manufacturing to rice to leather. In your view, and in what you're seeing, like what are the sectors that are most ripe for disruption right now, do you think?
Oh, what I see what is coming is in the space of is manufacturing, and when we start to think about intelligent manufacturing and actually the use more and more bringing in robotics, this is an area that I see from an industrial perspective being disrupted tremendously. And it is a bit of a concern when I go back to that example of the 80 million SMEs, which is very much manufacturing based, is that's why India wants to invest in free centers, because they know they need to accelerate quickly, because there's a huge amount of disruption that's coming in this space when you start to couple together intelligent manufacturing. So what do I mean by intelligence? I gave a couple of examples before. You take an old machine, you take out a chip, you put in an AI infused chip that collects data, energy efficiency, productivity, all of that. That's one aspect of it. But then when you start bringing in robotics, I think we're going to see a huge surge in the next 2 years of the use of robotics. I've witnessed it. If I can, just on a lighter note, if I may, Celina, just on a lighter note, I made reference to the fact that we had this AI for energy deep dive events here in our energy forum a couple of weeks ago. A robot moderated me. And, so even that, I have to say, I saw firsthand, and it may seem as a bit of a gimmick at the time, but it actually read out my opening remarks. It actually presented certain trends, etc. It was incredible, and it responded to questions and answers. So the fact is that what we might feel is being a gimmick, but it's going to come very, very quickly in the next 2 years. And I do see this as being something that will disrupt tremendously in a lot of ways as well, positively. Because and that's in the space of manufacturing. I'd say one of the second ones that's got huge, huge potential to be positively disrupted is agriculture. With the use of, we have some examples that we also did in Namibia, where we use a combination of AI, satellite data, mapping biomass to understand more about animal feed, to increase productivity and what have you. So I do see in the space of agriculture as well, this is also going to be an area that will be, and it has to be positively disrupted if you start thinking about some of the food security and safety issues that we're going to be confronted with over the next 3-4 years. No, we're going to change our food systems, and that's I see that as a positive opportunity.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I agree with those. So thank you, Jason. I mean, so finally, as you look over the next year and beyond, and as you develop this network of networks, this network of neural network, I'd like to call it. This neural network around the world. What is your vision for UNIDO? What are you? What does success look like for you?
Oh, it's a good question. So I touched on it before, and if I was to sit back in 2 years from now, and I look at the perspective of the global South, and I can confidently say that we've supported, of our 173 member states, I mean, well over 50% are in the global South. So if a good 20-30% of those countries, we've got them access to the technology that's available now, that's solving real industrial AI problems. I want it to remain concrete, not just, yes, we've sent the technology, but it's solved something very, very specific that is considered a huge challenge for that country. So if we could have said in 2 years from now, 20-30% of our member states have got access to technology, got the right skills, but have actually solved a challenge that is considerable for them, in whether it be in manufacturing, whether it be in agriculture, whether it be in their supply chains, and it's brought in the private sector and it's motivated innovators to scale, then I think we've done a reasonably good job. Each country benefits from that. It's not done in isolation, that we create this network that connects each of them so that there's a go-to, and that we in UNIDO can provide this guardrails, this safe space to enable India to benefit from Brazil, or Barbados to benefit from China, or from Ghana to help Costa Rica, for example.
Yeah, sounds exciting, Jason. So we're so excited to be working with you, and thank you so much for the time today. It's been great to talk with you.
Thank you, Celina. I enjoyed it.